benefits of not having a circus around every day. Just in that sense, it's help. They nipped it in the bud. So-and-so, it's your team. That gives us direction, and you know which way we're going, and you know who we're going with. It takes out a lot of the uncertainty. Roberts handled it 10 times better than anyone could have imagined. He's never been a distraction one bit. One person describing Cousins and Griffin's relationship as awkward, though that's been the case for a few years. I mean, I'm assuming it would be, as it's never been ideal. Stephen A., how has RG3 handled this season?
I think he's been sensational. I think that RG3 certainly wasn't perfect at the beginning. He did come across as somebody who was feeling himself just a little bit, but the attacks against his character were extreme and completely unnecessary. It's just that simple. You would have, I mean, the way that folks came at him were completely unnecessary. And now that he's sitting out, because let's face it, they'll have to pay him over $16 million if he were to play this year and get hurt. They certainly were not going to risk that. I don't know why they didn't just cut him at the beginning of this season and let him be done and be gone and free to go somewhere else then. I don't know the nuances of what surrounded that decision, but that's just my feeling on it. In the end, though, he couldn't have been a better citizen. He's kept his mouth shut. He's laid low. Hasn't said anything, hasn't drawn any attention to himself. Of course, it's going to be a bit awkward with him and Kirk Cousins because clearly Kirk Cousins is the guy that Jay Gruden wants to be his man, and the Washington Redskins have sided with him, and RG3's time in Washington is soon coming to an end because it's clear that he's not going to be back after this season as far as I'm concerned. Well, but with all of that being said, I think what happens also is this. It's important to point out that there's no reason for RG3 to say anything. Skip, I got a lot of loved ones in D.C., actually a few loved ones in D.C., not a lot. But I will tell you this, everybody that I know in D.C., they are of the mentality that RG3 was sabotaged, that he was never treated fairly by Jay Gruden, that Jay Gruden didn't really want him, that Jay Gruden was excessive with his criticism, meticulously dissecting what RG3 wasn't supposed to be doing, and it rubs them the wrong way. Even though they're Redskins fans, they have a very difficult time rooting for the Redskins because to root for the Redskins is to root for Jay Gruden, and they don't want to root for him. And to a lesser degree, Kirk Cousins. They know it's not his fault. He's been class personified, but he's had the benefit of being the favorite stepson per se, of Jay Gruden than RG3. And as a result, that has sort of sullied and minimized their support, or dissipated rather their support for the Washington Redskins, because to root for them is to root for Jay Gruden. And even though they're diehard Redskins fans, they're a bit torn. And I would not be surprised at all if the feelings of those few replicated or emulated that of a lot of Redskins fans in the nation's capital right now.
I agree with you. And however big that faction is, I am a part of it, as you well know. Big RG3 fan, remain in his corner. I want to remind people once again, he was the offensive rookie of the year in the National Football League, and he carried a Redskins team nobody thought had a chance to the division title that year. How quickly we forget. I also want to applaud Robert for having the guts, because I think it took some guts and some character on his part to stay completely off social media, to go along with, I assume, the team's request, no more interviews. He will not make himself available for any interviews anywhere, anytime, when he's at the Redskins facility or away from the facility, and I applaud that. I think he was kept around by the owner, who I think, if I'm right about this, still loves him. He wanted, obviously, Dan Snyder loves himself some RG3, wanted to keep Robert around because we didn't know how Kirk Cousins was going to do, and our hats are off to him. You've said it several times. He's really played well this year, way better than I thought he could. I just can't root for him. And as much as I respect Mike Shanahan, I got to give Mike Shanahan some props here, because Remember, Mike Shanahan originally wanted to draft only Kirk Cousins that year, was overruled by the owner, maybe the GM. They traded up and spent king's ransom to get Robert with the second pick in that draft, and they still down the line took Kirk Cousins. And I thought that was very unfair to Robert to have another rookie who had been a premier starting quarterback in college football, very successful at Michigan State.
Big Ten.
Yeah, and to have both of them vying not only for the job but for the affection of the fandom. It just splits people. It just wasn't fair to Robert and whatever. Then Jay Gruden, I completely agree. He undermined him publicly. I don't care what anybody says. If you want to go to sabotage, that's fine. But it just made me sick, which is why I told you when we picked the game in our earlier block, I just can't. It's hard for me to root for Jay Gruden after what he did to Robert publicly. He wanted Kirk. He got Kirk. And so far, so good. But I got to tell you, a whole lot is riding on Saturday night at Philadelphia. For Jay Gruden,
I agree.
If the bottom falls out and if they go to Jerry World and lose the last game, I don't know. We'll see how that plays out in D.C. and with the owner.
I agree.
So it's not over yet.
And the quarterback.
Yeah, a lot on him, too, for the contract.
Yeah, and the quarterback.
And the quarterback.
Yep.
I mean, you're on the radio in D.C., and they ask you a question about wanting to stay, and you talking about, well, that depends. Let's see how much I'm wanted.
Maybe
clearly
not.
are feeling yourself a little bit. It's an astute, it was an adroit move on his part from the perspective that, you know what, if he performs well, he could get paid. But Jay Gruden, you go into Philly and you lose against the Cowboys to end the season, and you on the outside looking in at 7-9.
Yep.
That's a bad look. That's a bad look.
And I'm going to say it one last time. I want to see Robert get another shot, a fair, clean shot somewhere else, maybe with my Dallas Cowboys. I don't know. But I want to see him have one more shot, fair shot in this league.
The right situation. We all want that. He's just 25, too.
Yep.
You know, he's got a decade. Sorry, Stephen.
I would say this. Hold on, Molly. I would say this. I would prefer to see RG3 in Dallas than Johnny Manziel.
Okay. Fair enough.
I'm with you.
That'd be me.
I second that one, Stephen A.
I would prefer that.
All right, coming up next, Kobe Bryant says Steph Curry is able to do something that few players in the NBA understand. The Mamba will explain when we come back.